everyone. Welcome to the Dreary and our second edition of our Shocktober Halloween kind of build up to Halloween horror film festival.
Number 2.
Indeed.
And of course, the tagline says it all. When there's no more room in hell, the dead shall walk here.
God, I love this shirt. Yep. We took a look at Dawn of the Dead yesterday, watching it again.
And just to specify, it's not the remake, it's the original film from the
70s. Fuck the remake. I mean, really. Like, that's the issue when you're trying to remake what is probably the best horror film of all time.
Well, Lane, we live at a time now where pretty much everything has been remade already, so we have to be specific.
No. So yes, this is Dawn of the Dead, the original classic film, sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And if Night of the Living Dead was the birth of the zombie genre, then Dawn of the Dead is the film that makes...
Simply teenage years.
Yeah, but this is also the film that makes the zombie genre a genre,
really. Yes, definitely.
It built the genre, really.
Codifier of the genre, really. This is the most inspirational film of all that at least has a budget.
And you can tell from basically these from any of the tropes occurring in any zombie media that a lot of these tropes did start with Dawn of the Dead. I know the game Dead Rising, some people even criticized it for its plot being far too similar to Dawn of the Dead, especially with the whole reporter lands on a mall with a helicopter thing.
Well, maybe it wasn't that bad the first time. It was the sequels that, they beat that dead horse. Really, they beat it because one time that you get trapped, a reporter gets trapped in a mall, but
then
but again. In 2 different versions?
Well, no,
really?
that was only an off the record. Like Dead Rising 2 Dead Rising 2 and Dead Rising 3 have literally nothing to do with a mall at all, except for the fact that it is still basically a mall, but it's supposed to be a city, but it's a mall.
Yeah, but it's just reusing art assets. I mean, it's
reusing the same plot basically every time. But that's not the point. So yeah, Dawn of the Dead is it's the creation of the hit zombie genre. We're going to see immediately after it tons of faux sequels from foreign companies, and again, this film is an Italian and American co-production, right?
Yes, Argento was the person who helped co-fund the new Dawn of the Dead, and he released his own version of the film internationally in most countries, specifically Spanish-speaking ones. And it's generally considered not as popular as the theatrical version that we got in the States and Canada.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, basically, I guess Europe got screwed over there.
It's shorter. It's not as well paced as the theatrical cut. There's also director's cut that's even longer than both versions, but I haven't seen it.
So anyways, Dawn of the Dead, I'm really just trying to get a feel for the fact that, like, basically, if you've watched anything that's relating to zombies, even if it doesn't know it, it's referencing Dawn of the Dead. It has done something that was originally done in Dawn of the Dead at some point. That's just how influential this film happens to be. And when you go back and look at Dawn of the Dead, you see all of the things that made the zombie genre popular in the first place.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You got the claustrophobic feel of being trapped inside a massive structure with zombies gathering on the outside. Just actually taking the idea of the house being boarded up in Night of the Living Dead and expanding it to its logical conclusion.
Oh yeah, you can fit more zombies in a mall.
Yeah,
so basically with Dawn of the Dead, I myself consider it to probably be the best horror film I've ever watched. When you look at it, it does still do a lot of gorier things.
Oh, yeah.
Even nowadays, the whole idea of someone being ripped open and their entrails being eaten on screen is not something that's done very frequently.
Yeah, by the way, those effects were, of course, done by Tom Savini. This was his first film, first zombie picture that he did with Romero, the start of a very lucrative relationship between the two men, which would carry over into many other films, including, of course, this film's inevitable sequel, Day of the Dead.
Mm-hmm. So first off, the question of the plot of Dawn of the Dead is what does it do? What does it do exceptionally well, and what even might have done better than Night of the Living Dead? Or at least what it did differently. Well, Night of the Living Dead is a story about social isolation inside this cabin during, or inside this farmhouse during the zombie outbreak. But Dawn of the Dead, though it does focus on only like a small group of four characters, it shows us those characters essentially before the fall, basically while the zombie outbreaks are occurring, what they were doing beforehand. So we really get a sense actually of the degeneration of society caused by the zombie outbreak, which wasn't shown in Night of the Living Dead, where at the end of Night of the Living Dead, it becomes it's actually quite optimistic to the idea that the zombies will be defeated.
Yeah. The characters we have here are essentially four main characters we focus on throughout the movie. We have the single character of Fran, we have Steven, who is a helicopter pilot, and we have the two militarized officers, Peter and Roger.
Peter is going to be Peter is the character that is most fondly remembered by most people. And hey, Peter Washington. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's his last name. It's never actually stated out loud in the movie, but that's definitely the character's last name.
So already we have a better sense of setting than Night of the Living Dead. It's still set in it's still basically set in like around Philadelphia, though not actually in the city, of course.
Inside a newly opened mega mall that, of course, were a very new concept in the 1970s. Such big super centers that had everything you could need, all those convenience stores featuring pretty much all the products you could possibly need to get.
Mm-hmm. A symbol of the commercialism of the time.
Yeah, commercialism taking a new step.
So after this, basically after we get our introduction to the characters, we have the scene, like the standoff with like the Puerto Rican gang and everything like that. Our characters essentially decide that stuff's going to shit way faster than anyone expected, and they just need to find a way to escape.
Yeah, they need to find some type of safe haven to escape to, and of course, Stephen being helicopter pilot, they use the chopper to escape and spend a little time looking around before they finally come across the mall, of which the majority of the film is set.
Mm-hmm. Going into the mall, and this is indeed where all the events of the film are going to be. And this is something that's so brilliant with Dawn of the Dead, is the concept of we get to see the effects on society, especially with like the television broadcasts and the radio, just like with Night of the Living Dead. But the story itself is very isolated. We only have four people who are stuck in this situation, but we know that there is a much greater conflict at hand.
Yes.
This was kind of a this is kind of a tactic that is reused by Max Brooks in World War Z. He makes a story that is a whole bunch of smaller stories from a personal point of view, but in a much larger grand scheme.
If you take it into account, the earlier scene where we're first introduced to Roger and Peter, who, when they are raiding this apartment complex, searching for zombies, with a bunch of other soldiers and officers, and going in guns blazing, essentially. It does feel like something Max Brooks would write about in one of his short stories.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is Exactly. So that's another influence you'll find. And that was the issue I had with the film World War Z. The film World War Z tried to. They had one character that went everywhere to show us the entire conflict, and that is not how I felt like.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make for as good storytelling as something like
Well,
World War Z or Dawn of the
we'll
Dead.
get into more of that if we ever decide to waste a couple hours of our lives watching World War Z.
Yeah. So another thing that Dawn of the Dead kind of knocks out of the park in comparison to Night of the Living Dead is its soundtrack. Now we talked about, of course, that Night of the Living Dead soundtrack, though it's public domain, it worked very well for the film.
It uses a great deal of synthesizer music, which was still quite popular at the time, and
so Dawn of the Dead's score is actually even more iconic because it was made for the film. Now, certainly, anyone who's seen the film certainly remembers the bass theme to the film, and then also there's the music playing in the mall. All that stuff has become rather iconic.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard that a lot.
So essentially, Dawn of the Dead has a terrific soundtrack that goes extremely well with the film. It seems to complement it in basically every way that I can find. It works at just the right level. It is a very. And there are times in the film where there isn't any music playing at all, of course. So I think that it was a very smart decision. It was very well done when to use music and when to keep things silent, essentially.
And I have to say, there are some definitely new things being tried with this film. For one, it was a very limited budget, of course, and yet they were able to film all these interesting shots. And Thomas Meany, with his special effects, given the time constraints available, they were only able to film during the winter months of '77 and the early spring of '78. It's amazing how much he was able to get by with so little time and money. I know that it's been complained about with all the blue-looking zombies with their simplistic makeup effects, but hey, given what was available, it's actually very impressive.
And the ones who don't even have makeup.
Oh, there are a few of them. And you know what I do like are some of the shots where the zombies are uh, cut up or stabbed, and bright red blood comes gushing out, and it creates a vivid contrast with the blue skin color, which is very graphic and gives a very somewhat comic book pulpy-esque feel to it that I think Romero and Savini were going for.
Yeah, and I think that worked out very well. So stylistically, this film has far more style than Night of the Living Dead did.
No.
In this case, like Night of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead is interesting because it has its own distinct style because it is the one that kind of created the zombie genre. But Dawn of the Dead has a style where it's like even though the rest of the zombie genre is taken from Dawn of the Dead, it's Dawn of the Dead somehow remains unique among all zombie films.
And of course, some zombie films will not buy. Some zombie films are so blatant, hashed, and blatantly put together that they spend pretty much no effort in making characters that you care about as the survivors in their movies. But this could not be farther from the truth with Dawn of the Dead, as they spend a generous amount of time getting to know all four of the main characters that very well on an intimate basis. We get to know their likes, their dislikes, how they feel about each other, and them becoming
Yeah,
a bit of a unit.
yeah, definitely. And we get to see we see a lot more. We see that originally Steven, especially, is this character he's the helicopter pilot, of course, goes from being kind of a bit of a coward and
a terrible shot with the gun too.
yes, but he goes on to being very dependable in the later film, and him and Peter end up becoming a lot closer by the end. Now, yeah, characterization is a really good thing in Dawn of the Dead. It's taken further than it was in Night of the Living Dead because this film is so isolated and so set on its characters. They do spend a lot of time on it. So we've got a character like Peter, where it's like he is he's like a special ops guy, and generally he's pretty good at killing things. But then we of course also learn that he had like his grandfather was a spiritualist and things like that. We also learn about his views on like respect for the dead and things like that as well.
Now, yes, and how that is essentially an outdated ideal now because you can't be respect the dead when they come back and try to eat you.
Yeah, so Peter is in the end a very pragmatic person, though he's also a risk taker. And we can say Roger even more so was a risk
Oh
is a
yes,
risk taker in the film.
especially yes, he definitely gets very takes a lot of risks, and that not all of them turn out quite well.
Hmm. So I'd say in characterization this is good. As for plot, this film, again, though it sets itself in the greater stage of like a full-on zombie apocalypse, this is a story about survival at its basis, and it is a terrific story in that regard. There are not a lot of there are some people out there who can't handle a film where the only plot is seeing these people try to survive. But I think Romero pulls it off so well here.
Now, an interesting parallel is that in this movie, like Express of Night of the Living Dead, we are we do cut to several television sequences that are being posted over the air with a person who has intimate knowledge of how these zombies work, and eventually pleading with anyone who will listen that they have to take a very nonchalant, scientific approach to dealing with these zombies, or else we're all going to fall.
Hmm. Yes. They get up and kill! The people they kill! Get up and kill!
Best line in the movie.
That is those are some fantastic lines. And again, this film like delivers on having the most iconic kind of zombie lines. That whereas Night of the Living Dead was introducing the facts about the zombies, how you need to shoot them in the head to kill them, this film is introducing us to the moral dilemma of killing someone that you know.
Yes,
and
the conflict.
The film itself doesn't dwell on that too much, but the fact that it introduces this concept is like it is incredible because this happens in every thing in the zombie genre now. There's always a scene where someone will be forced to kill one of their loved ones who has turned, and in this case, in Dawn of the Dead, it doesn't affect the main characters that much. Um, Peter's too much of a badass, anyways. But
Yeah.
essentially, it introduces this concept to us, and it does introduce basically. Well, when I'm talking about the plot, I'm talking about how what other like in every other zombie work now, it is generally about a small group of survivors. The Walking Dead got to be like a whole caravan of people. Ridiculous.
Coming and going and coming and going and never really reaching any sort of conclusion. Yeah.
So that's essentially like I feel like that. Okay, that's another thing we need to say about it being influential. But in the end, the plot, though there isn't like much of one because it's all about survival and it's kind of all about hopelessness. It's so well executed, despite that.
Absolutely. And I don't know how much we want to go into spoiler territory here, but the four characters do a really good job of basically setting themselves up in the mall and basically turning into their own private fortress.
Max Brooks would probably have been proud of their
ingenuity.
Yes, of their ingenuity.
Yes, and of course, I had to say it is definitely an outside influence that leads to the downfall.
Leads to the climax of the film. If, for anyone knowing, this is a George Romero film, so don't expect a happy ending. But don't expect
that one time.
But don't expect an absolute downer of an ending either. In this case,
yeah.
Let's see. If anything, we can go into.
Well, depends if what you mean. Romero wanted a downer ending. He didn't get a downer ending. That's not what we got. But yeah, there was an alternate ending, and it didn't actually get filmed, but it would have been a lot more depressing. I can tell you that. I can tell you that.
And then what we've got, like, okay, much like Night of the Living Dead before it, this film is a social commentary, just like most just like, well, just like how all of Romero's zombie films try to be. Like, other zombie films don't, but
What could be said about the messages and all that hasn't been said already? The issues like consumerism, the proliferation of violence in American society, the easy access to guns and other means of causing destruction and harm.
Human tribalism and things like that are also pretty big themes in this story.
Yes.
You know, always the constant idea that humans can't really band together to help each other, even if like small groups will.
Yes. And that in some ways, humans are more of a dangerous threat to each other than the zombies are to them.
And this film introduces something very important, actually, to it introduces something very important to the genre in general, and that is the uh, essentially. Hmm. Oh yes, it was the idea that the zombies have. It's idea that the zombies have like a recollection of their past life.
Yes, I mean, why would they be trespassing all over this mall if they know that there aren't any humans in it? So the only other explanation is that this was, like Peter says in the movie, a very important place in their lives when they were alive.
Yeah, so Peter recognizes the need of the zombie to the needs of the zombies to go and like go to places in their past life, most specifically the mall. And this is also something that's going to get revisited in some zombie films, but oddly enough, the vast majority kind of throw this idea aside.
Oh, but it's definitely going to come back in the next Romero movie.
It is going to be probably the main plot point in Day of the Dead.
Oh, yes.
Is the recollection of the undead. And in this film, it's heavily pointed at that the zombies can like instinctively remember parts of their past life. They're like some of the greatest works incorporate that part of the Romero zombie. So yeah, it is all about commercialism almost. It's a play on the fact that that the mall is like, even in death, the zombies are going there, and the zombies are like a metaphor actually for the American consumer. The mall has become the most important part of their life.
Absolutely.
And what is a better consumer than the zombie? The zombie is the best consumer in the world because it eats people. The zombie is basically the greatest kind of consumer archetype you can think of.
Absolutely. No, in that scene where they raid a gun store and lock up and on all sorts of heavy ammunition in order to help get the zombies out of the inner workings of the mall. That wouldn't work in most other countries other than the United States.
Yeah,
you know?
we stated that, like, you would not find a gun store with tons of ammunition and stuff like that outside the U.S. Not in a mall.
Certainly not in Canada.
In Canada, you might find you might find a gun store somewhere, like in a mall, but not generally in Ontario.
No, I haven't. I haven't been to one. I could tell you.
So that's a thing in the U.S., and that's another thing that's going to be revisited in the zombie genre. Basically, you can't say much about Dawn of the Dead without giving a lot of it away. But the characters are great. The plot is terrific, and I think it's very well paced. How it's done, it's not really a boring moment at all. They know how to do suspense properly and things like that, and how they use the zombies in this film. And again, we do generally base it off of its influence. I personally think Dawn of the Dead is one of those perfect films, really.
Well, it's definitely can be considered Romero's magnum opus, the best film he's ever made, and eventually one of the cornerstones of not just the zombie genre, but of horror in general.
I think in the end, Dawn of the Dead does so much right, and it does so much that, yeah, if you were going to base the zombie genre off of anything, I can see why it would be Dawn of the Dead.
When people think of horror movies and zombies and think of what the really big heavy hitters are, they're always going to list Romero's first two films, Dawn of the Dead specifically, because it has left such an indelible mark, and a lot of the messages it says are still very topical today.
And
Perhaps even more so in some ways.
How appropriate it was, too, that Dawn of the Dead was the dawn of the zombie genre as a whole.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's what you have to take away from Dawn of the Dead. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But Dawn of the Dead just recognized that this is the birth of what became the most popular horror genre
Of the modern era.
Yes, of the entire modern era. Remember that zombies came to dominate the world, and the man we have to thank for that is George A. Romero.
Thank you, George.
So that's basically our thoughts on Dawn of the Dead. There's not much that can be said except go watch it, because in my opinion, it's one of the perfect horror films.
And I will never disagree on that point.
So, come see us next time when we take a look at Day of the Dead. The
dawn is past. Now we must endure the Day of the Dead.
We'll see you next time.